Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As our chair is not here at the moment, we're going to get the meeting started with our interim designated chair, Mark Kaplan.
Oh, you would hold it down. This is the biggest committee meeting I think I've ever seen here. Okay, so welcome everybody. I declined the role of being chairman when it happened. I'll act here today. So let me welcome everybody. It's, I think, the biggest crowd I ever remember seeing here opposite us. So I think the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes for the prior meeting. Do that later? Oh, the roll call. Okay.
Okay. Starting with our private members, Larry and Angelo.
Present.
Mark Kaplan.
Present.
Marsha Van Wagner.
Present.
Our public members representing Mayor Eric Adams, Paul Timus.
Present.
Representing Comptroller Brad Lander, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Now we can do the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for the prior meeting, please? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is, I guess, whoops, have I done it now?
Okay, you don't need to hold it. Oh, you have to hold it the whole time?
My finger.
Okay.
I guess the next item is the people sitting opposite us as the presentation for the New York City Housing Authority. As you all know, I am a member of the Audit Committee of the New York City Housing Authority, so I recuse myself from participating in this aspect of the meeting, much as I like to do so. So let's start and introduce yourselves, please, and who's going to talk, and please go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Jeffrey Lesnoy. I'm the Vice President and Controller of New York City Housing Authority. To my right is Anika Lescott-Martinez, our Chief Financial Officer. To my left is Jill Strohmeyer, Managing Director of Deloitte. We have a variety of the leadership team here from NYCHA too, who will support any questions that come up.
All right. Would you like to start your presentation now, please?
I can do that. And just one technical question. Do I need?
Yes, sorry.
We're going to have sore fingers, you and I.
Before we go into the details of the financial statements, which I intend to present, the financial statements as of 2022 compared to 2021, I want to talk about some overarching topics that affect the financial statements. First, we'll talk about accounting pronouncements, accounting standards. We implemented GASB 87 during 2022. We restated that back to 2021. GASB 87 establishes a uniform approach for lease accounting based on the principle that leases are financing in essence. From a lessee perspective, which is an impact primarily from our office leases, we had $824 million right to use capital assets in our restated 2021 results, and we had $846 million corresponding lease liability. The amounts amortized to some extent as of 2022. The right to use capital assets was $782 million in December 31st, 2022, and the corresponding lease liability was $824 million. We also had some relatively insignificant impact from a lessor perspective, where we reflected $26 million of lease receivables and a similar amount in our deferred inflow of resources. We had a $23 million reduction in our restated net position for 2021, primarily result of the change of the assets and the liabilities. And revenue recognition and expense recognition are changed very significantly in terms of timing, line items in financial statements, as well as presentation in the statement of cash flows. There was no other significant impact from any other GASBs in our 2021 or 2022 financial statements. So we had enough with GASB 87. On to a second. Which has an overarching effect throughout financial statements is our rent collections and our rent arrears. And I'll provide a few statistics to the group here. 2019 rent collections pre-COVID was $1.058 billion. 2020 was $967 million. 2022 was $873 million. Tenant arrears going kind of in the opposite impact. $111 million in 2019, December 31st, 2019. $186 million in 2020, up to $439 million in 2022. So NYCHA drove, supported 128 million rental assistance applications, 33,000 approximate households through the New York State Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP. The approval process was initially delayed. On May 2nd, 2023, the New York State Legislature passed a budget bill which will cover the authority's ERAP applications and $35 million incremental rent support. As a result, NYCHA reflected $116 million reduction in the allowance for uncollectible accounts as of December 31st, 2022. And tenant allowance for uncollectible accounts after that adjustment was $285 million as of 12/31/2022. Since issuing our 2022 financial statements, NYCHA has been actively partnering with OTDA in the verification and processing of ERAP claims. To date, the authority has collected $54 million in ERAP funds, and we expect to collect most of the target before the end of 2024. The last overarching effect I want to discuss is pollution remediation obligation, which is a very material item on our financial statements, primarily due to lead paint. Lead paint obligations increased from $3.1 billion in 2021 to $3.7 billion in 2022. This includes both the abatement and the temporary remediation and testing for lead paint. The New York City Local Law 66, effective December 1, 2021, defines lead findings at 0.5 milligrams per square centimeter, which is stricter than the prior New York City 1.0 milligram standard. Under the new standard, we are required to test substantially all units at move-out. In addition, NYCHA has initiated the program to aggressively test and abate all units with children under 6. With 18% of the apartments tested through end of April, 35% of the units had been identified as positive for lead, versus 27% using the old standard. The increase in positive test percent is the primary driver of the increase in the pollution remediation obligation, as well as the primary driver of the 2022 special item, which is $721 million on the statement of revenues and expenses. So with that said, I'll dive into the actual statements, and I'll go kind of in a flip reverse order, go to the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in that position first. Operating revenues increased by $74 million, 8%, to $1,062 million. But this includes a $116 million increase in tenant receivables and tenant revenues due to reversal of previously recorded allowance for uncollectible accounts due to ERAP. Excluding the impact of the ERAP adjustment, operating revenues decreased by $42 million or 5%. And that's kind of a normal situation in our PACT environment where we were transferring properties over to private developers under the PACT program. So our PACT transactions were about 6,000 units. In December 2021, we had 5,225, which had a big impact on rent collections in 2022. And in February 2022, we had another transaction of about 700 units. So combined about 6,000 units, which came off, which represents about 4% of the units. So that's kind of demonstrating that rent is kind of stable between 2021 and 2022, excluding the PACT transactions. The settlement of ERAP claims will provide the authority with more flexibility in the future in collecting remaining rent arrears above the 12-month maximum ERAP, including through payment plans and various legal actions where NYCHA was previously limited. Operating expenses increased by $372 million or 9% to $4,735 million. Included within operating expenses are rent for leased dwellings, which increased by $133 million due to higher housing assistance payments per voucher and an increase in voucher units. However, this expense increase was partially offset by a $60 million increase in Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Subsidy. Due to timing differences in processing the housing assistance payment subsidy, these variances usually offset over time. In addition, our general and administrative expenses are up by $212 million, largely due to an increase in pension expense, resulting in changes in pension plan investment income, and an increase in claims expectations within the self-insured general liability program. Maintenance and operations increased by $69 million, utilities increased by $49 million. Partially offsetting the above expense increases is other post-employment benefits, OPEB, expense which decreased by $99 million due to a change in discount assumption from 2.25% to 4.31%, really due to the Fed impact. Non-operating revenues grew by $78 million or 3% to $3,192 million. This includes subsidies and grants, which increased by $130 million. Within the subsidies and grants, some of the major categories are public housing subsidy of $1,212 million, up by $113 million, and Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Subsidy, $1,450,000, up by $61 million. The loss from change in fair value of investments was $42 million in 2022, a $29 million increase due to rising interest rates in 2022. The special item on the statement of revenues is triggered as it meets the criteria of infrequent. 2022 reflects primarily cost increases resulting from the new City of New York standard to test and abate to restrict to 0.5 milligram level. This resulted in positive lead findings of 35% in 2022 versus 27% in 2021. Capital contributions, $806 million in 2022, up by $48 million versus 2021. The largest capital contributions were from the Federal Capital Fund, $302 million, FEMA, $228 million, City of New York, $180 million. A net position, $1.2 billion at 12/31/22, down by $397 million from 2021. Note, if not for the change in the lead standard, 2022 net position would have been $300 million greater than 2021 net position. On to the statement of net position and the comments relating to that. Total cash and investments of $1,284 million at 12/31/2022 versus $1,638 million at 12/31/2021. For a $354 million decrease, largely due to continuing shortfalls in rent collections versus billed, growing expenses, and timing differences in reimbursements from FEMA. Accounts receivable net increased by $219 million, $116 million due to reversal of the allowance on tenant receivables, and a majority of the remainder due to growth in receivables from the city, which were collected in 2023. Capital assets in the aggregate increased by $352 million to $9,757 million due to continued building improvements. Note that capital assets include $782 million net right-to-use assets per GASB 87 in 2022, and $824 million right-to-use assets in the 2021 restated results. Current liabilities 2022 reflects a $92 million reclassification of OPEB liability expected to be paid during the next 12 months as per Deloitte's recommendations in 2021 management letter comments. Unearned revenues, current and non-current combined, is roughly flat to prior year. Net pension liability increased by $514 million, largely due to a decrease in investment returns in 2022, resulting from the volatile markets. This also impacted deferred inflow of resources for pension with a $460 million decrease. OPEB non-current liability decreased by $672 million, largely due to increase in discount rates from 225% to 431%. This also impacted deferred inflow of resources on OPEB with a $417 million decrease. Pollution remediation liability, current and non-current combined, increased by $619 million, largely due to the increase in lead positivity to 35% using the new 0.5 milligram standard, less payments and expenses incurred during the year for work performed. NYCHA discovered an error in its historical calculation of net investment in capital assets, NICA, where only debt incurred was being deducted from capital assets, but no deductions were made for other liabilities such as retention payable and other accounts payable to vendor. This had an offsetting misstatement to unrestricted deficit, but no impact on total net possession. This issue, approximately $230 million, was addressed properly within the 2022 financial statements. Management has also evaluated the effect of the potential reclassification within the 2021 financial statements to determine what, if any, reliance users place on NICA. We concluded that users of our financial statements do not rely on NICA for decision-making or performance management, and concluded that from both a qualitative and a quantitative perspective, that this was not a material, uncorrected misstatement to the 2021 financial statements, and therefore we did not restate. Deloitte reviewed our conclusion and concurred with management. With that said, we're open to any questions.
Anybody have any questions about the financials? If there are none, I'd like to management letter.
Jill Strohmeyer will take care of that.
Does anybody have any questions about the management letter? Do you have any comments from? There seems to be a good number of IT comments.
Yeah, so there's a total of 5 comments within this letter. I just want to let the committee know that all 5 of the comments are the lowest severity of a deficiency. So there's a material weakness, a significant deficiency, and a deficiency. All 5 of these are of the lowest severity. One comment relates to the NICA item, the net investment in capital assets item that Jeff mentioned related to 2021, which management did correct in 2022's presentation. And then the other 4 comments do relate to information technology. They are primarily around passwords, access, and change management.
Yeah, I have a question about that because so it sounded like the agency is responding to those problems. It's a IT software, migration issue, it sounded like. Is the timeline for fixing that? I think in the management letter it said it was like March 24 or something like that. Is that still a realistic timeline to fix that?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to turn it to our Chief Information and Security Officer, Roger Shields, and our Executive Vice President for Information Technology, Patty Bay Ross, to discuss.
Yeah, all of the timelines mentioned in the management letter are still on track.
The item about the net assets, is that really truly resolved? And will that possibly happen again for 23?
Take that question. So we discovered this as a result of the GFOA publication, which was issued to all of the members and indicating that they thought that there was kind of a historical problem throughout many governmental agencies in how they reported NICA. So at that point in time, management investigated and found that we had some flaws in our process going back to the beginning of time, and we adjusted it for 2021. It wasn't very difficult to do. It was just due to a lack of understanding and communication on the topic. We looked back, we calculated for prior years, and we have a process where we can calculate it going forward relatively easily. So it should not be a recurring problem. It is resolved already.
Happy to see that the net effect is nothing, but it was just a reclass really between two line items.
That's correct.
Are there any other comments or questions? One comment. These financials are December 22. And here it is October 23, and we're first reviewing them. And like the lateness that we receive them, because typically this is a day where we only are doing the cities. So to get you to come in before the end of the year and your end of the year was a struggle. So what could be done that we could get these financials more on a timely basis?
Well, our financials are typically published and issued by June 30th. They're approved by the board generally at that point in time. So we can certainly, do our best to schedule something in the summertime.
We don't meet in the summer. So, can they be here by June 30?
Well, the financial statements were available on June 30th. So we can send them out to the comptroller's office on that date, yes.
Meeting with this audit committee by June 30th to me would be a very important thing.
I think we can evaluate the technicality of that, but there's generally an audit committee meeting with the NICHA audit committee NICHA audit committee in mid-June, and then we have it approved by the board, typically in the last week of June. So there's a little bit of a timing challenge there.
Let's see what we could do.
Good morning. Is it possible that you could bring a proposal to the board to expedite the approval so it could come to the comptroller's office in a reasonable time? Or could you make a promise today that you will actually put a proposal to the board?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you were saying.
I'm saying, could you bring a proposal to the board? Because from what I'm hearing, you're saying that it's ready by June 30th, and then you said you have to give a proposal to the board, and then you give it to us. But can you go to the board and approach them to have an expedited meeting or a meeting off calendar to expedite the time that it comes to the comptroller's office? Or at least to make a promise that you're going to do that.
I can make a promise that we will look into it. I cannot make a promise that we will be able to expedite because that is determined by the NYCHA board calendar and their availability.
Well, can you at least make a promise that you will propose the idea to NYCHA board?
We will evaluate.
That's not a promise, but.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you for coming today, and I apologize for being late.
Thank you very much.
For the record, I just want to announce that the chair, Michael Spitzer, is present, as well as our public advocate representative, Wesley Paisley. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Mikhail, can we stop the recording? Thank you. We're now in public session.
Okay, thank you. Coming into public session, the Audit Committee has received an overview of the city's financial statements as prepared by the Controller's Office, as well as a presentation by the auditing firm of Grant Thornton. And I'd like to have a motion now that the Audit Committee has reviewed and approves for the city to move forward with publishing the city's financial, or the Controller's Office to move forward with publishing the city's financials.
I so moved.
I second.
Can I say unanimous? Yes. If no other items to appear before us, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the public session of the Audit Committee.
I moved that one too.
Second.
I guess unanimous. Thank you. Take a 5-minute break and then the meeting's adjourned. So yeah.